Is it? All right. Okay, so I guess I want you guys to help me understand the background behind the sexual harassment law.
How did it start? Background?
Uh-huh.
It started with the Title VII in the 60s, right? Let's see.
Yeah, 1964.
Yeah, Civil Rights Act. It was part of the Civil Rights Act in 1964. But they had a hard time explaining it at first, it sounded like.
Yeah, it says that sexual harassment's not actually mentioned. It's that victims thought that it should be under there. And
yeah, with the sexual discrimination, yeah.
Yeah, and then, but I thought it was interesting where it said the courts were slow to accept that theory. And like the one court in Arizona was like, he was just expressing a personal urge. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Well, I think the courts have to be, they nitpick over every little word of a law, and it's kind of frustrating sometimes.
It really is
Yeah,
sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think it was also a new concept because up until then, people could express whatever they wanted and treat people however they wanted with no issue, no consequences to it.
Consequences, yeah.
So it was kind of, I mean, the men were coming from, no, I can treat women however I want. They're kind of our property. So had to get out of that mindset.
Yeah, and that wouldn't be fast because I mean, it's hard to change your own thinking, let alone all of society's way it's been forever.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It was in the 1980s that the EEOC started revising the guidelines, and then in 86 the Supreme Court finally agreed that sexual harassment was along the lines of Title VII's sex discrimination.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it was still just that it's the EEOC's guidelines. It's still not like spelled out in the law. It's just that because they set precedent, it sticks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but if the Supreme Court says that is the case, then wouldn't that be law?
Well, so what it says, so in this second paragraph, it says, in 1986, the Supreme Court set binding precedent when it deemed sexual harassment to be a form of sex discrimination, and the court heavily relied on the guidelines in the landmark decision. And then it defers to state law, so it looks like it's pretty much that just because they set precedent, that now we go with it.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah,
good.
I don't think
it's essentially law that
right. Like
you have
it's
to go
common knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. So can one of you give like one student, I don't know, what is sexual harassment?
It's the unwelcome advances of another, worker, somebody in that environment that you're in for work, and based on gender is what it sounded like the definition was in the reading.
Okay.
Yeah, that's part of it for sure. But it also encompasses any harassing behavior that is directed at a given gender and is motivated by hostility toward that gender, even if it lacks sexually explicit content.
Okay. Looks like Alex is having a problem with his sound. Are you still having problems, Alex?
I don't think so.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
So I had a question about sexual harassment from like when it started. So did it start from this law that was against sexual discrimination, and it turned into more specific details about sexual discrimination and sexual harassment?
That's kind of what it looks like to me, because it says it was part of the Civil Rights Act,
Okay.
and then victims started saying under the Civil Rights Act, if I'm harassed, that's part of discrimination. But it took until the late 1980s for the Supreme Court to rule that that was the case specifically, and then it just kind of became common law type. Like, I think if you went back to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, it probably does, because it says it does not specifically mention sexual harassment. So it's just kind of evolved into that over time.
Okay, cool.
So maybe prior to that, it was more like, well, I can't not hire you because you're a woman kind of sex discrimination, rather than the whole actual, harassing somebody because of their sex.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Well,
how
yeah,
I
and
understand it.
Yeah, well, and Title VII seemed to cover that if you didn't get the job because you were a woman, but sexual harassment then goes into what happens when you have your job and how you're being harassed.
Right.
So it seems like it falls more under the EEOC, and then it's just a matter of how far they take it, like, because you file your case with them, and then they investigate, and then how far it goes from there as far as your job.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so do you think a good definition would be unwelcome advances from a coworker or supervisor in a sexual manner, or?
I think that's part of it, but there's also the other part where it's not really an unwelcome advance. It's just anything that's directed towards your sex that's intimidating or harassing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think so.
So does so what if you're sitting around the water cooler and a couple men or a couple coworkers are making derogatory jokes? Does that fall under sexual harassment?
Like derogatory towards what?
Just, I guess, derogatory towards women. Say they're men coworkers.
If it offends you, it can be.
I think that's where it would kind of go under the hostile work environment harassment, but that looks like it's a little bit harder to prove because it says that it has to have the purpose, the victim's job has to be impaired, and they have to perceive it offensive. I think it probably goes under that one.
Yeah, I think it's more like the intent. Are they saying it because they're just what they say, or are they saying it because they know that you're coming up and they want to make you feel uncomfortable? And that's going to be hard to do.
Or if the joke is like towards the person, that could possibly fall under the sexual harassment if it's directed, like involving the person in the joke and making jokes about that certain person, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But I think too, I think we live in a society where people are so happy that, if I was in a situation like that, instead of just going straight to HR and saying, I'm going to file for sexual harassment, just go to the people and say, hey, can we not tell jokes like that? It bothers me, or, start with a civil approach before going and filing a complaint is what I think.
Yeah, I think that'd be reasonable.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, because like I said, it's been a long time since I've been in the work environment. So, but I remember someone saying, just don't talk about anything, like don't have crude jokes or anything like that. So, all right. So, So, did you guys all read this story, the Lone Star case? Okay. So, based on Martinez's story, does her situation constitute sexual harassment?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes.
for sure.
All right. So, how?
It's the unwelcome advances. The thing that I'm really emotional about this case, sorry, it's really hard for me to be objection to not objection, but to have objective. What's the word?
Be
I don't
objective.
know. Anyway,
Yeah.
yes, to be objective in this case. The thing that really bothered me about it was his actions seemed to, they didn't stay at the same level. They kept moving up and getting worse and worse. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That really bothered me about it. But just the things he said to her and the physical contact, definitely sexual harassment.
Yeah. I think even if people questioned what he said to her, once there was physical touch, there was no doubt about it.
Right.
Well, even some of the things that he said to her, it was not just I'm telling a crude joke at the water cooler because I'm trying to be funny to my friends. It was directed at her.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, like when he
It was
said,
just,
"Don't scream, I'll just deny it," he was being threatening on top of,
Yep.
physically touching her.
Yeah, and then whenever he said that, I mean, it's like he knew what he was doing was wrong.
yeah, total escalation, and he was in charge. He is just, he's one of those sexual predators that just really, really upset me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, do you think it is a quid pro quo or hostile work environment?
Oh,
Hostile. Definitely hostile. I'm not quite sure about the quid pro quo because he wasn't really promising her anything. He was just doing the actions.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't threatening. He wasn't threatening that she would lose her job. Like he said, he would deny it. He didn't threaten that she'd lose her job.
Mm-hmm.
It says the individual making demands, but he was in a position of authority. So it kind of like, and it was like one time for sure. So it feels like it falls into both. But the one
Yeah.
best fight would be the hostile work environment.
Yeah. I think it would be hard to prove the quid pro quo one.
Okay, so but it does mention that she is afraid she'd be fired. Do you think?
So the very first sentence says quid pro quo harassment involves a proposed exchange of a job benefit or sexual favor. So she was afraid, but at this point with the information we have, he hadn't threatened her job.
Yeah.
So I would say quid pro quo sounds like it has to be specifically stated that you'll lose your job.
Yeah.
Where that didn't happen, so that's why I think it would be hard to fight it. I think it's there, but I think it would be too hard in a court of law to fight it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that.
I think they're all just kind of scared of the French guy, whatever he brought.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
The manager, just because they feel like he has enough power to just deny it, and like the reputation that many people would think that he wouldn't do such a thing, and like the HR guy and Julia feel like they just can't do anything because they'll just be fired.
Well, and I think it's complicated by the fact that she doesn't want, even when the cost was like, hey, I can help you with this. She was like, no. Like, the fact that she's not stepping forward is going to make it a lot harder.
Yeah.
Well, and
even under hostile work environment, because it says the victim has to perceive it to be harassment. And so if she's not going to act like she's perceiving it that way to everyone else, then it's going to be hard to fight.
well, and I think one thing with her, it sounded like she lived in her home environment wasn't good. So she maybe didn't really understand that it was harassment because she lived in a harassing environment. She just knew it didn't make her comfortable.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, she did.
I think she did know. She was just so scared on both fronts. She didn't know. It was like the frying pan or the fire. Which one am I going to get burned in,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I think she does realize she's just too scared to make a choice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she said she didn't want her husband to take things into his own hands. And
Yeah.
that could get even worse than confronting the boss.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the part that worried me, is that she's worried about her husband's temper and taking things in his own hands. Like, what exactly does that mean, right?
Yeah.
Like, is she worried he's going to kill her boss? Like, what are we worried about here?
Yeah, for real.
Yeah, you're hoping maybe it just means that he'll, the boss will get upset and fire her or something, but you don't know for sure. Maybe he is abusive, or maybe he just has a really awful temper and of her.
Mm-hmm. All right. Do you think DeCock got the accurate advice when he called the council office?
Do I think he what? Sorry, you cut out part of it.
Oh, do you think he got accurate advice?
The HR guy?
Yeah, the guy that overheard. So whenever he called and talked to a lawyer, did he get accurate advice?
Well, I remember reading in the Harvard, where it was talking about sexual harassment, that if a company that it's happening, they need to follow up and find out. That sounded right with the HR department when they said, well, if there's a case, we need to know about it or else we can be liable. So I remember that.
Yeah, to the top of page 4.
Mm-hmm.
At top of page 4, it says, if an employer has some knowledge about incidences of sexual harassment, it cannot bury its head in the sand to avoid learning more.
Yeah.
So I think once he called for advice, it put it, like, whether he got accurate advice, like whether he really had to do anything because he's not the employer, like he was a coworker, so whether he had to do anything, once he called, he probably had to because now the employer knows.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think the lawyer at that point was covering for the company for sure. Like, no, you have to report this because now we know.
Yeah.
Had he only heard, I don't know if he would have had to.
Because it could make the whole company liable for this problem.
Mm-hmm. But she did make a point, because, I mean, a good point, that he was, I guess, a colleague of French. He could have been called as a character witness. And, he knew could have gone back onto the employer, even if he didn't tell somebody else. Because was he someone of authority?
I think he was it seems like he might be some type of management, but not over her directly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but because I thought he was in some sort of management or supervisor position too. And just because he was in that type of position, the employer could have known, or, the employer could have been held liable for him knowing.
Well, but there should be, I mean, I think that first you have to go internally and you should report it within the company. And if your company doesn't have any policies regarding how to proceed with that, then I think then at that time you go to the EEOC or the state system and file a claim there. But I think really you should start within the company.
Mm-hmm.
Unless he did totally feel like it was, the management was corrupt and wouldn't do anything, then maybe you could. But for her to say that you're required to call the EEO, you know, maybe they didn't have a policy within the company.
And
Well,
I think if she's saying you're required, I think that obviously he's in management, so he should have, like, they've never had a training on this. I mean, he seems high enough in the
Right.
company, he should have had a training. So I think you're right. There's a problem with the company's policy to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Well, the one thing that I state here to clarify that she told him to call the Lone Star EEO. So Lone Star did have a department.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So what I was saying on that is he didn't, like, he was trying to figure out how to get through the hoops. He didn't already know. Like, when he approached the situation, he didn't already know. Most companies, especially if they're big enough that they've got lawyers and, like, in-house lawyers, it's definitely bigger than 15 people.
Right.
You would think they would have had a yearly training, or most companies have a training. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? And so clearly there's a problem with their training because he didn't know what to do. He's like, so he's calling all confidentiality, confident to all these people, trying to figure out what he's supposed to do. He didn't know what his role was. He didn't know what was required of him because obviously they're lacking training.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. There should be like a line of authority to go to for that kind of stuff, and everybody should know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Yeah, and the fact that she didn't know what to do either, that she felt that she was stuck.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
every semester at BYU Idaho, don't you get a sexual harassment email?
Oh, yeah.
Like, information? I mean, and you're a student, not an employee. So this is a pretty big company with in-house lawyers. There's something missing in their training for sure.
And I mean, especially if she's asking for a transfer, it obviously has enough offices to be able to go somewhere that's close by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't know if it's in the law that I remember or not, but especially you would think within a company, whatever policy they have, they would require their employees to report it, whether it happened to them or whether they saw and heard that it happened. You would think there would be something saying they're required to report it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I remember that was like one of the first things when I had a job several years ago that they, like, even before probably filling out the employment packet, they address sexual harassment and what to do and what lines to follow. So
you can kind of see when you're just reading this Lone Star case, you can see the costs, like his fear, right? He's like, should I step back in my office? Should I pretend to cough? He has like no idea what to do in the situation at all. And so clearly he's scared for his job with the whole merger going on and stuff, because he's like, what do I do? Should I just pretend I didn't hear it? So yeah, there's no training on what to do because he was living in fear. So obviously the whole work environment's pretty fearful.
yeah. So, all right. So why might the lawyer representing the company insist on instituting a formal formal investigation?
They're required.
Well, her job's on the line, right? Her job is to defend the company.
Mhm.
That's why they have an internal lawyer. So her job's on the line. That's why she said that.
Well, and her job also is to take care of the company. And now that she knows something's happening, she knows that the company could get in trouble. So she's got to make sure that proper channels are taken so that the company isn't liable and it's,
Yeah. And on the flip side, go ahead.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, I was going to say, and on the flip side, part of her job with HR is making sure that all of the employees are safe, working in a safe environment. And part of that includes one that's not filled with, harassment and fear and things like that. Not just, machines.
Yeah.
It's a safety issue in a way.
Yes, and I think that by her saying that to him, saying we need to open a formal investigation, I think it drove home to him how serious the issue is.
Yeah.
And that he should pursue it, you know.
Mhm.
It's interesting to me that, like, on page 2, it talks about how he got a notepad out and he's writing down the pros and cons of who he should talk to. And I mean, he says, I guess I should have called general counsel. And maybe there's policies for situations like this. Like, your first thought is general counsel, not HR. I mean, wow, yeah, I'm a little worried about the training here.
Yeah, that kind of made me angry too. Don't know what to do. Good.
All right. How would you guys evaluate John Costa's options at this point? And what do you think he should do?
I felt like he needed to find somebody that he knew had like good values in the company, like a higher up guy that he might have known or was friends with, somebody that he knows is going to make the right decision or make the right make the right things happen, and talk to that person, and maybe try to get Julia to talk to that person.
I think that's a good point, Alex. I feel like hopefully in every company, the HR person would be that person.
Yeah.
You know, they're familiar with all those kinds of things. That's what they're there for. And I feel like it was his duty to report it to HR and then let HR take it from there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think he bypassed that step going straight to general counsel instead of HR, and that's kind of a problem here because now that he's gone to general counsel, he almost has to do what the lawyer told him to do now. Like, which is hard because Julia doesn't want him to. So, I mean, it's not like you can persuade her to do anything.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But then at least, you know, that would have gotten it off of his shoulders and said, okay, I did my part, I reported it, and now HR gets to handle the dirty work and figure that all out.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if that could be one of the options, is try to talk to her into going to HR about it.
That would have been a good option.
Yeah, that would have been a good option. Do you think this is just my thought, do you think she's the only one that he's harassing?
That was one of the reasons why I felt like if it's escalating, they've got to stop it right now, because he probably is harassing other people.
Mm-hmm.
And if not at the same time, definitely, I feel like definitely in the past or at different times.
Yeah, and the thing is,
not
if
at work.
she does transfer, oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, and maybe not just at work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
if she
obviously
does
he already knew to do a threat, right? I'll deny it.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like he's new to this.
Not his first rodeo.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I guess if you were in Julia Martinez's situation, are you willing to get fired over this? I would be.
Yes, it infuriates me. It makes me so angry.
Mm-hmm.
I would be, but I'm not scared of my husband.
Yeah.
I mean, right? I mean,
that's true. She's
scared of her. She's scared of her husband's temper. Why is she scared? Is she scared that he'll do something to her or to the boss or to her friends at the company? Like, where's the fear?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know how to armchair quarterback what she should do, because I'm not scared of my husband. I would for sure, you know, if I was being harassed, I would for sure report it, but I'm not scared of him.
Mm-hmm.
He's
Yeah.
glad he's home today. He had knee surgery yesterday, so he's hearing me tell him I'm not scared of him. So he feels better now.
All right. So, what is DeCoste like ethical duties?
I think he is required now he's got to talk to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Got to talk to HR or keep talking with the general counsel, because at this point it is the company knows, that there is a possible case of sexual harassment, and so they've got to follow up, or else they will be liable.
Did
Go ahead, Alex.
did DeCoste tell the lawyers who it was?
I don't think
No.
he did. I think he tried to keep it as what's the word?
Confidential.
Confidential. Yes.
Yeah, so
Sorry.
I
He
feel
didn't
like
even tell his name.
yeah.
No, he didn't.
So he definitely still has that obligation to move forward with telling somebody.
Mm-hmm. Well, it kind of reminds me of that. I think it's on ABC where they'll have hidden cameras and have these outrageous situations, but that actually happen. And how many bystanders sit there and just watch it and don't do anything about it?
Seriously.
I mean, he knows something's going on. He knew Julia was scared, wasn't happy where she was working. So, ethically, can he sit there and do nothing?
Ethically, I don't think he has the choice to be a passive bystander anymore.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think ethically he can, and I also don't think that for his own morals and values and his own sanity, right? Because he sees the French guy at lunch, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna go back to my office."
Yeah.
Like he took a break to go get lunch, and then he ends up going back because he doesn't want to deal with eating lunch with him.
Yeah.
So it's going to affect relationships down the line for him now, because now he's going to be worried about Julia. If something really escalates more, then he's going to feel that guilt. I mean, really, for his own sanity, he needs to do something aside from ethically and morally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, not only you need to do because he heard the fear in there, but as an employee of the company, he also has an obligation to the company.
Mm-hmm.
Because that could be a huge liability for the company.
And it would be best if he could encourage Julia to do something, but I don't know that he's got a relationship with her enough to do that without her feeling more threatened.
Yeah, you really don't know their relationship. But as an employer, if I knew that I had employees who let that kind of thing happen over, months, I would have a really hard time keeping them on.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like it would be the best option to try and get her to come forward with it?
I do think that's the best option because anything that he overheard is hearsay and isn't held up in court.
And she could still deny it if somebody came to her and asked her about what he said. She could just say, "No, I don't know what you're talking about."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Maybe he could just go to her and say, "This is not acceptable, and because I heard you talk about it, I have an obligation to report it. So either you can go ahead and step forward and report it to HR, or I will. But either way, this has to stop."
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, because even if she gets transferred, who's to say who takes her spot? It's not going to continue to happen.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think the best option is somehow, I don't know if he could figure out who her friends in the office were to encourage her, because clearly it doesn't, she's not taking much encouragement from him, because, it talks about them talking to each other. It's like he needs to find a way that she can talk to somebody, and whether that's hey, another employee being like, hey, go talk to Julia, see if you can help her out. She's having a hard time. I don't know. It just seems like
that
somehow
might
you
get
gotta
into
find.
confidentiality kind of issues too. You might, I think you just have to continue to work directly with her, because if you start talking to other people saying she's having an issue, then they're exposing a private matter that, you know what I mean?
Right, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I mean, whoever she's talking to on the phone, she's not willing. It's her sister, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, she's telling that person, but clearly she's not talking to anyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. So one thing it points out here is the only thing he can report is what he overheard from Julia's conversation. He hasn't seen anything, and she hasn't even named who the alleged harasser is. So should he really report this? Since, I mean, he's only overheard a conversation, and he hasn't seen anything, and he doesn't even know who it is.
Well, she said it was her boss somewhere in the conversation.
Yeah, because he said he didn't feel comfortable with the guy in the lunchroom.
Mm-hmm. But he also says that he came to that conclusion on his own, but he wasn't 100% sure.
But it says
Well,
here,
on page 2, it says,
Yeah.
he's absolutely not. He's my boss. It'd be my word against his.
Okay.
So, I mean, he would have known who her boss is.
right.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, he could only report what he heard. Like, my concern is because he called general counsel all confidential. Like, they have to assume, hey, is it you? Are you trying to get out of something here? Are you trying to cover your own self? Or are you being harassed and you're just, you know what I mean? Like, at some point, you have to wonder what's, you know what I mean? Like, it's all hearsay. So how do we know that confidentiality, like if you're general counsel and you're getting this confidential call, how do you know it's not him doing something, trying to find a way out of it, or him actually being the one that's abused but thinks it won't matter because he's a guy? You know what I mean? So now it's like even tricky in that aspect.
Yeah. Okay.
He probably should just report it because he's kind of in the middle now.
Yeah.
Would that be, I don't know, would it be possible to report it just like vaguely, like you know something's going on, but you don't know all the details? You're not, like, just to like get it off your conscience, get it off your chest, so you're not held liable for something that you overheard?
Well, in the sexual harassment note, it talked about the corrective action, and an employer has a duty to investigate and to take prompt and effective action. So, investigate, we have to find out if this is really happening or not.
Yeah.
So,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it says they don't have to terminate anyone. They just have to remedy the situation.
yeah, they just have to find out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. So now we get to role play. So we have 4, I guess, roles: potential victim of harassment, accused harasser, a bystander, and legal counsel. So what do you guys want to be?
I'll go with legal counsel.
Okay. Anybody want to be the bystander?
I'll be the bystander.
Sure.
Oh,
Alex.
How about the harasser? Everybody wants to be the harasser.
I'll be the harasser.
Okay. All right, so that leaves the victim.
I guess that's me.
All right. Okay. So now identify the most important things Okay, so with these roles, what you're supposed to do is identify what you want to see in policy. We're going to come up with policy. So you guys kind of brainstorm on what you want done in policy and procedures in your organization. And then I guess be prepared to defend those choices.
Is this based on what happened in this scenario, or just in any
Just based on
scenario?
our role.
Just a company's policy. So I guess we're not really role playing. You guys just have roles, and you guys need to think of things that you'd want to see in policy and procedures.
I would want to see, as the victim, I would want to see it spelled out to me and easily accessible how I go about reporting if something like that should happen to me. Who do I go to?
Okay.
And also knowing that it's going to be a confidential discussion. Because I think that's a lot of times why victims don't want to come forward, is because all of a sudden it's just out there, and there's no limit, you know, and so I would want to have control over, you know, who in the company knows about it.
Mm-hmm. Do you think knowing that your job is secure?
Oh yeah, definitely.
That's what I was just thinking. Legal counsel, from a legal counsel standpoint, I would say that I would want a training program in place at orientation. Like as soon as you're hired in orientation, I would want a training program that explains like how to report, but what the expected behavior is and isn't, and then how to report it, and make sure they understand, like under that corrective action paragraph, that you know, that the situation will be remedied promptly, effectively, but there won't be retaliation, because maybe she is scared. Aside from being scared of her husband, maybe she's scared of the retaliation at work. You know, or just, you know, victims get a bad rap a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would want to make sure that the retaliation aspect of it is pointed out in that training. Because you've got management here worried about their job in the merger, not knowing how to report things.
Yeah.
Needs to definitely be like an ongoing training. Like, because we forget, right? Orientation, you're overwhelmed.
Right.
You're just starting out. So I'd want it like a yearly training, or like a big orientation and then like a yearly refresher or something.
Well, it seems like Union had it posted on our above the copy machine at work where I worked about sexual harassment and what it was and what to do about it should it happen. And so it was always there. You always saw it.
Like an ongoing reminder, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that's important. And one thing, remedied without retaliation, I think that's so important, because history, just what's, you know, what type of sexual harassment has played out in the media just shows who has the problem. When you think about like Monica Lewinsky, you know, Bill Clinton has gone on and lived a normal life, but Monica Lewinsky has had to go into hiding, and she's known for that. She hasn't been able to get jobs. She hasn't. So I think that's really important.
Yeah.
It even affected her dating wise. So.
Yeah, I think the confidentiality and the retaliation are big parts of what needs to go into a company's policy.
Mm-hmm. So how about bystander, Alex? What do you think?
Just for like what they should do.
Yeah, what type of policies are in place?
I feel like that the biggest policy is just knowing the authority that you need to go to, or the line of like people that it's supposed to go through when something like this happens. Definitely the biggest policy, because that bystander that sees something is just like a normal worker shouldn't have to have a responsibility placed on them or have to deal with that thing individually. because I feel like that could be a hard thing for somebody that's, going to work and has to deal with that if they don't have people they can tell to solve the situation.
Yeah, nothing like just going to work and minding your own business and getting thrown into something you don't want to be a part of.
Yeah, because I feel like
Yeah.
nobody would ever choose to be a part of something like that
Mhm.
unless it was like their own bad decisions.
Well, and I think it's also important for to know what your responsibility is.
Mhm.
True. And I feel like on that note, the responsibility of that bystander is to just report it and not take it into their own hands to do something about it, because that could cause many problems as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so know who to report it to,
Yeah.
and then just report it and hand it off and know that you're done.
Yep.
Which probably plays into the retaliation too, because it doesn't really say, but he doesn't really mention being scared of his job necessarily. But especially since this company's merging, that's in his head somewhere. So he needs to know that he can report it without retaliation also, right? Because maybe he's just trying to make waves to keep his job and
Mhm.
to get other people to lose theirs.
Yeah.
And so he needs to know he needs to know the chain of command, like Alex says, and know what his responsibility is, and that there's no retaliation for him either.
Mhm. So when it comes to like proper authority, do you think it's important to have more than one person? Like, I don't know if a department's the right place, but because I'm thinking, even if you're in that place of authority, employees might not necessarily feel safe.
Yeah. Or what if that authority is part of the problem?
Yeah. Mhm.
So definitely have more than one source to turn to.
Okay.
And also, I just thought of something. Another part of your responsibility would to keep it confidential for the sake of that person that it might be happening to.
Mhm.
Just like confidential from people that don't aren't in that authority, that don't need to know about it or hear about it, because that could spread, and then that would be bad for people and the company, because rumors can be a bad thing.
Yeah.
Like what Brother Stanley said, send it to the right email address, or how did he word it?
To the right mailbox, yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
I think it's kind of a chain of command thing, right? Like you need to understand if this happens, you go to like HR, and if it's a department, fine. If it's one person, you need to know who that person is at HR, right? And then if you need to go to the next person, this would be the person you go to. And that way, if the HR manager is the problem, you know that you go to the next person, right? So if your bishop's causing problems, you know you can go to your stake president, right? So there's a chain of command where obviously no one knew because he jumped right to general counsel. In this case, I think that's part of policy is you have to understand how the chain of command works, but know that you can jump past at some point, right?
Mhm. Mhm. All right. So Sarah, is there anything the harasser would like to see?
I like this policy as it is. Yeah. As a harasser, I want it to be the little half-page paper that's tucked in the hiring folder that you never get to,
Yeah.
and that's considered the training. That's the orientation.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It needs to be convoluted and confusing because that's how I keep doing what I'm doing.
Mhm. Well, do you think there should be policies in place for once you have been accused? I mean, I know this guy, he was a pretty drastic, but I mean, should there be like 1 strike, 2 strike, 3 strikes, you're out of the company? I mean, should there be that type of policies in place?
Well, because there are false accusings, is what you're saying, right? So
Yeah.
Sarah, what if you've been falsely accused? How do you feel?
If I have been falsely accused, I definitely want the chance to be able to defend myself and to show that, you know, if somebody has accused me, I still have a chance to show that I'm past that kind of behavior. I don't do that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, again, where it talked about in the corrective action, if I was flirting and I thought I was fine, but somebody thought it was over the top, and so they reported me for it. If they, you know, if HR comes up to me and says, we've had this problem, I still have a chance. Okay, I won't do that, and I'm done. You know, and then I can just keep doing my job, and it's not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that there was a problem. You've told me that there's a problem. I can fix that now.
And so
Yeah.
there again, strict confidence is essential, because once there is leaked out to other employees that there was even an issue, even if they don't know specifics about it, you know, it just, people can look down on you, they can shun you, they can question, and
Yeah.
the whole dynamics
Yeah,
of your
who
office
wants to work with me on
changes.
a team now?
Right.
So one part that really stands out to me on the law is like under the hostile work environment. Like it says it has to rise to the level that the victim's job performance is impaired or it's so intimidating, hostile, or offensive, which obviously in the case of Julia, it fits those. But then it says that the conduct must be objectively and subjectively offensive, that a reasonable person would find it, which obviously the cost finds it hostile or abusive, right? And one that the victim, in fact, perceives to be so, which she perceives, but is she going to claim that? And so then as the harasser, right, he's got a loophole right there. Because if she's not going to go forward, he's got a complete loophole because she has to perceive it and be upset about it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not anything we can necessarily change in a company's policy, but that's kind of a scary loophole right there in the.
Yeah, and he's already threatened her.
Yeah. So for you as a false accuser, that's even scary. Like if you're false accused, right? That's even scary too because the victim perceives it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, like that's a scary sentence.
Yeah, there's a lot going on right there.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, I was just thinking maybe the company should have sexual harassment classes or, you know, like kind of an action plan once you've been accused of how to work through it and just an action plan. Because I mean, I don't think it should be immediate dismissal. I think that, you know, there should be, you know, an action plan in place.
Yeah. I know
like
a lot of companies.
You're out policy.
Yeah.
I know a lot of companies, they'll do like the anger management classes or the sexual harassment classes that you have to do on your own time. Mm-hmm. To show that you're moving forward. I am taking responsibility for my actions when you have been done those things. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really important too.
Well,
you know, offer.
And how do you feel about, I mean, I was just thinking along those lines, you know, if I was the victim and my supervisor was the one who had harassed me, you know, is it fair that because obviously you can't work together after a situation like that. After he's been groping you, I mean, there's just no way. And so is it fair to say, well, he gets a second chance, he gets to keep his position, and you're going to have to move because you aren't the supervisor? Or, you know, how do you determine who's going to have to change departments or whatever the situation is?
I didn't think about that.
Well, again, it kind of goes back to the corrective action. What were the actions that he did? You know, what did the harasser do? And there are some cases where it is just I need to talk to you about fixing this behavior and you're done. You know, that's the corrective issue. And there are cases where it's you're going to have to take some classes, or we're going to have to terminate you because that is just, I think that's just not acceptable in any workplace. That is so unprofessional.
Like, even under the corrective action part that we read on page 4, I was surprised by some of them. Like, the Fifth Circuit Court said that even though the complainant had to spend a day and a half completing a business trip because they promised her she would never have to work with him again, she had to finish the business trip. I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
like, a lot can happen in a day and a half.
Right.
You know, and then the other one was because a Florida District Court held that an employer fulfilled its obligation by instituting a company-wide sexual harassment training, even though it failed to identify and punish the perpetrator of a prank. I mean, it's kind of vague. I mean, you know, it's up to the courts in the different states to decide. Yep, you did your part, company. You made them work together for a day and a half, and then told them they never would have to work together again. Some vague territory.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, again, I think that comes back to why it is so important for companies to have a really specific sexual harassment policy and everybody knows what it is.
All right. Okay, so do you guys, I guess, do you want to know how it ended? Because this is a real case. Okay.
Yeah.
So when Jack called corporate counsel, he forgot about caller ID. The lawyer used the information he gave her to figure out the people he was talking about. She contacted Lone Star EEO, which launched a formal investigation. The EEO tried hard to get Martinez to cooperate. French denied all charges, claiming that Martinez had made up the story to protect her layoffs. DeCoste was asked for evidence, but he didn't have any. Julia Martinez's husband found out what was going on, beat her up, and forced her to quit. French survived the investigation with only a bruised reputation. He blamed everything on DeCoste for calling corporate counsel. There was so much animosity between DeCoste and French that DeCoste left the company after 3 months. So what do you guys think that Lone Star's sexual harassment policy was?
Well, it obviously didn't cover retaliation.
Yeah.
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 Well, and it didn't have confidentiality since
Yeah.
her husband found out about it.
Right.
Yeah, it sounded like it was all really public and ugly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they didn't protect DeCoste either.
Right.
No.
They didn't. The poor innocent bystander, man. Alex, you were wiped out.
Yeah.
That's for
You
sure.
just wanted to go to work.
Yeah. I didn't even want to hear the conversation. I think that goes back to him not wanting to hear the conversation. Maybe he felt like he knew what would happen already. He knew this whole process was going to be terrible, and was just still knew he had to do something, but didn't want to have all this blow up in his face, which it obviously did.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's that going to do to future sexual harassment issues in the company? Nobody's going to want to step forward.
Yep.
Yeah, it gives me, the harasser, more power almost.
Exactly.
Yeah, because he got nothing.
Slap on the wrist. Yeah.
That's why I think the harasser should have the opportunity to defend himself, but because the accusations have been made, something should be done.
Yeah.
Even if the harasser doesn't feel they were in the wrong, there should still be a policy in place to where the harasser would know, okay, this is how I can stop this from happening again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because the current policy basically put the innocent bystander in the position of needing to grab a recorder, right? He had no evidence. It was all hearsay. Like, you have to be thinking on your feet fast enough. Oh, I'm the bystander here. I better go grab a recorder and record this side of the conversation.
Let me get my camera and put it on and...
Yeah, or you have to have recorded lines all throughout the office because no one's going to step up. It's going to be just like the show you guys were talking about where nobody steps up to do anything because, right? Like, so on my husband's mission, he helped out in a car accident, and by helping out in a car accident, he ended up becoming a victim. He got hurt while he was helping, right? So then he's thrown into the middle of that situation. And that's kind of what happened here is the bystander's trying to help, and then it's worse for him because he was there.
Mm-hmm. So it's almost like he was
kind of stand back and not help, right? Like you've got doctors or you've got teachers that won't do things. The teacher that lives behind us, he does not allow kids' friends in his house. His own kids as friends cannot be in his house because he's a school teacher, and he does not want any implications that friends were in his home. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have a whole society living in fear that they can't do anything because you can't be a bystander without a better policy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes it, I mean, you feel this moral obligation to do something, and you can't do it. Like, I've just trying to think of, like, one time I was driving home in my neighborhood, and this little boy had fallen and broken his arm, and it was so bad the bone was actually out of the skin. And I watched 3 cars drive by him and not even stop. But where we live in the society of what if they were to stop and they were to help him and cause more damage, they could get sued. I mean, that's kind of what we live in.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and all I did was say, hey, I have a phone. Can I call your mom?
But there are laws that do protect people who stop to help.
Yeah.
As long as you're acting within your, if you're not a doctor and you try to do a tracheotomy, then that's not okay. But as long as you're acting within your realm of just a bystander stopping to help, there are Good Samaritan laws that protect you against that.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I think that's why it comes back to this policy. The company needed a better policy, and they needed to understand it because he was already scared of being a bystander, and then it proved to him he shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Yep.
Well, maybe in this situation, because of the merger, they didn't know which company policy they were going off of. The old one,
That's true.
So it needs to be clear. So, I guess we kind of already talked about like things that we would have put into policy and how it would have helped in this situation. Do you think the final consequences or what finally happened could have been avoided?
With the better policy, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, it was bungled the whole way through the process.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we're, done. But I guess we have the, what was the most important thing you guys learned from this case?
That a company needs to set up the proper policies to avoid having catastrophes happen within their company.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, kind of like where Lisa works, you've got to know what the policies are. Whether, victim, bystander, harasser, you've got to know.
Mm-hmm.
And just having a company from the beginning, even just saying we have a strict sexual harassment policy could and hopefully would deter people from who might normally do those kinds of things to keep it under control, at least while they're at work.
Mm-hmm. So make the policy known. Well, one thing, my sister's brother-in-law, he's in HR, and I think one thing that he's found is that the HR department is one of the first departments that is like right now he's working construction because he lost his job and he can't find another job in HR down in the Utah area, like Salt Lake area. And I think that's kind of sad because the HR department is important because companies need to have policies and someone needs to be there to make those policies, make sure the policies are followed through on, make sure that when something happens, people know where they turn. Yeah. So I think there's a great importance in HR and that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think as individuals, we need to take it more serious. Like, because my mom, she works for Salt Lake County, and she has to do a sexual harassment online course every year. And she was like, I have to take this dumb course. I have to do this thing on the computer, right? So even our attitudes, right? Because we don't think it's going to affect us, it's not going to happen to us. Our own attitudes, we make HR's job hard as employees, right? Because we're like, oh, I have to do this. We have to go to this meeting. It's such a waste of time, right? So I think there's some individual attitudes that as individuals we should probably, and maybe teach our kids, hey, this is kind of a big deal. You need to pay attention when they're doing this because if you're in a situation, you know what I mean? Like they're just education. Because even my husband at his case, like, yeah, we had our sexual harassment training this, and you pretty much like tune it out because you're, it's not going to happen to me. I'm not a harasser. I'm fine. And so I think a lot of it has to come down to kind of attitude. And like you said, where we don't think we don't understand the role of HR and we don't understand their importance in a company until we don't have somebody to go to.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And I think when you said education, DaCosta didn't know what to do. You might not ever be a harasser, but you might fall in his situation and you need to know what to do.
Yeah. And so it's like when companies put these policies in place, they might want to go in and look for situations, like as an owner of a company, you might want to go in and look for like an example that you can share and be like, I know this feels like a waste of time to you, but it's very important because we don't want any of you to be the bystander. We don't want any of you to be the victim. We don't want any of you to be the harasser, right? Like, and obviously there's individual attitudes that will come into that, but there has to be a level of education because we really do blow it off. Like, I mean, when you worked or when you didn't work, I mean, how many things, do you blow off that BYU Idaho email? I do. Oh, sexual harassment last time I'm at home. Hey. Like, we really don't think about it, right? Like, but if something was going on in this meeting right now, I didn't read the policy. I wouldn't know what to do, honestly, because I'm like, I'm at home. What do I need that for?
That's true. So I think, take it more seriously. All right. So how would you guys rate the discussion today?
You did a great job.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was great.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. Said from 0 to 10.
Oh, I would say a 10.
Okay.
10. Lots of information and tough information.
Or maybe a 9 since Joseph wasn't here. It would have been better with him here.
Yeah, he offers such great perspective.
He does.
From a different culture.
Yep.
So, all right. So, what did I do as a leader and what could I have done better?
I thought you did a really good job keeping us going with the questions and moving us forward in the discussion. And I really can't think of anything to improve.
Especially with as much as we had to cover in an hour's time. We did a good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think that you moved us along and you kept it going and kept us on track. Didn't let us get sidetracked.
Yep.
Yeah, we're good at that, not getting sidetracked. I'm pretty impressed with our group that way. So. All right. Well, I think we covered it all. So thank you guys for coming. And yeah, we miss Joseph. I hope everything's okay with him. So, all right.
What do you guys want to do about doohickeys? That's due is that due this week?
Actually, no, his email said the first paper isn't due till like week 7. I was looking at that. I'm glad you mentioned doohickeys because I meant to bring that up. Where was that email? Doohickeys. No, that's not the right one.
Because the original thing says week 5.
Yeah. So here he sent out a due date clarification, and we're due on October 17th, which is Monday. So that is me. Wait, the due date is 5th. Oh, I guess the original due date said the 5th. So yes, doohickeys is due.
Okay.
Wrong. So I haven't contributed to the thing, but I have gone in and I see that that you guys have been contributing. I guess kind of contribution will be when I'll add my ideas then.
I tried to start creating an outline to outline the 3 problems and then the solution.
Yeah.
The hard part I'm finding is what part, like we have the main problem, but then attaching the wording from why we're saying that that's an issue. It's just I was gonna attach, okay, because it's this section in the paragraph that's saying that they have this problem, but it makes it for a really long outline when I do that. So I'm not sure the best way. Do you guys have any ideas to better organize that?
I have to think about that.
I don't know if it would help if because we need 12 solutions, right? 3 problems and 12 solutions.
Yeah.
So I think without maybe worrying, I'm not really, I haven't looked at the outline yet, but maybe without necessarily trying to attach stuff, we just need to determine exactly what we're going to declare the 3 problems. And then we could start attaching stuff, right? Like, so if I looked at your outline and it was problem number 1, sexual harassment, which obviously is in that case and obviously is something we've covered. So if that's a problem, great. Then everyone start putting their documentation either to what, right? So then you document how it's a problem, and then everyone can start finding solutions. So then you'd have 2 outlines. You have an outline that lists the 3 problems, and you start putting your documentation there, and then the 12 solutions, and then whoever can find the documentation for those solutions, start putting that in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That sounds good. And
Definitely
so
clarifies a little bit on what we should do.
I put in the comments there that I had put 3 problems that I noticed, but if you guys have any others that you can think of that might be a little more, top of the line than those 3, then feel free to change them. That was just the ones that I threw in there, so.
Okay.
Well, and our problems need to focus on what we have been studying, because there's obviously a slew of problems with the company.
Right.
Right. So I looked at the schedule that, so what it says we've covered, right? So week 2, it was strategic HR management. I'm not really sure that that was leadership. So we can talk a little bit about leadership if there's a problem with leadership. And then week 3, we talked about teams and performance appraisals. And that was the Army crew case. So obviously working together, but how to appraise a situation and, performance appraisals. So that coaching, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then lesson 4 was equal opportunities and diversity. So we could look at how they're not dealing with diversities at doohickeys. Right? Because they're not dealing with diversity. There's the upper management that are all the white guys that are friends. And then there's all the people down in the mailroom that appear to be not speaking English. And then you've got the obviously sexual harassment. So we can pick 3 problems from any of those categories.
Well, and the ones that I put our performance reviews are non-existent, lack of company unity, and diversity within the company doesn't value differences or promote equal opportunity.
Mhm.
I like those.
So
I like those too.
if we wanted to change one of those to sexual harassment, we could do that too. But whatever you guys think.
I think we could probably cover the sexual harassment under leadership because doesn't somebody go in and it's a brand new manager and someone comes in and complains, am I remembering doohickeys right?
Just a new HR person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean I know it mentions sexual harassment, but I don't know if we've got to the point where maybe that's where under leadership we can talk about the policies of sexual harassment like we've talked about today, where they need to have a training and a policy in place, but not make it so much the focus.
Yeah.
So tell me again, because I'm not seeing a place to turn it in where it's showing a deadline. Where does it state the deadline is for this paper?
He sent out an email, and in that email, he clarified the deadlines. But you're right, I don't know where they're turned in at.
Is it in the group leader folder for this week?
Oh, is there?
Is your guys' BYU Idaho thing not working right since the update over the weekend?
My email wasn't working yesterday, but it is today.
Like
Mine's been really slow.
my iLearn doesn't work right. Like, you know how you can click on content and it would list everything that's due?
Mhm.
For this class, I can see the list of what's due, but if I click on it for my other class, it says planned maintenance and shuts down that screen. I can't look at my content screen at all.
Oh, that's
That's
interesting.
a problem.
Yeah, and then I have like icons, like blanked out icons instead of a checklist. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just my machine. I might have to call the online support because it's not working right.
What web, like what browser do you use?
Chrome?
Chrome? Huh. Yeah, that's weird because mine's working all right with Chrome.
Yeah, I can't. In this class, I can go on content, but where it, like the check marks are on the sides, like there's a picture by the quizzes instead of a check mark. I'm like, what on earth happened in that update? It was not pretty.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know where to turn it in either. Is it in next week?
It's not in the leader because it just says to turn in, I guess, my leader right up there.
Yeah, I don't see any place to turn it in.
And I don't see it in next week either.
Maybe it's just a matter of emailing him when we're done instead of having to turn it in
Maybe.
online.
It could be.
Which email would help since we're doing Google Chrome. Or Google Drive, sorry.
Oh, it says at the end of the designated weeks, you will submit a team paper on the discussion board.
Yeah, if you go to week 5, the doohickeys instructions, and then scroll to the bottom, there's a place to submit it.
Doohickey's instruction.
Yeah, for week 5.
And so this is going to be one where just one person submits it for the whole team again, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so it says team leader, go to the next page to access, and it has the link to access there.
And when I click on that link, I'm getting the same thing you're talking about.
Oh, yeah, me too. I just clicked on it and there's no...
Oh, error, page not found.
Yeah, I just got that too.
Yeah, I think the new update was problematic.
Yeah.
I guess maybe just email him. And we'll have to ask him about it.
I don't mind sending him an email and asking him about it because I need to figure out what's going on with my iLearn apparently anyway.
So who's going to turn it in for us? Maybe we should decide who's going to turn it in, then we can decide a date that everybody's got to have their information in it for the final edit.
I thought I was, since I was the week 5 leader, but
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So
If you're okay with that, I'm not objecting.
Are you?
that's what I was planning on. So I have 2 girls going to homecoming on Saturday, but besides homecoming, that's what I was going to work on Saturday.
Okay, because it's due at 8 o'clock in the morning Monday.
Yeah. So I was gonna. So yeah, if we had all the contributions done by Friday night, if that works, and then Saturday I can work on, putting it all together and all that.
Sounds
Works for me.
Okay.
Sounds really
That's
good.
fine. And then if you just want to if you want to email or something so that we can check it if you need more input or if you need proofreading or suggestions or something. I have a few things off and on Saturday, but I can get some time to look at it.
Okay. Yeah, that will work. Because if I work on it all day Saturday and then just email it back and forth, I normally don't do anything. I don't do homework on Sunday, but I do sometimes go in and look at stuff. So.
Yeah, I don't usually do it on Sunday, so I'd prefer to. And I can't turn anything in at 8 o'clock Monday morning. There's no way.
Yeah.
So, but I'm happy to on Saturday help coordinate. If you need proofreading or if you need more contributions, if we worked on it, whatever else you need on Saturday, so you're not just on your own, buried in your office.
Yeah. So I will get, and I'm getting up early because I've got a 8 o'clock soccer game too. So I will get an early start on this because I'll have all my other schoolwork done. So I should have a final thing to send out hopefully early afternoon.
Awesome.
So.
Sounds good.
So, all right. So I think that's a good plan, and I will go in and add some stuff because I'm just looking at it. I'm like, oh, but I will go in and add stuff. So sorry, anatomy and physiology is really taking a lot of time.
I bet.
Wow.
Alex, are you on that Google Drive? Did you get it?
Yeah, I got it. I just haven't put anything on yet.
I just want to make sure you're not being left out.
No, I'm good. I can look at it.
Sounds good.
So,
Thank
yeah. And Lisa, I liked the problems that you presented because you're right. We can include sexual harassment right there in the diversity and leadership one. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they're broad enough problems that we can find. That's what I was worried about, is finding 12 solutions, right? Because sometimes I feel like, well, I'm not in HR, so I don't know.
Yeah.
So if it's broad enough, we can help look for solutions.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. So, all right. Sounds good.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye.
Thanks.
See you next week.
week.